How do video games affect children? Teenagers. Most people agree that video games do affect children, whether it is by making a child more violent or even changing their outlook on life. Most people, player or not, simply act as if this is a truth to be believed. But is it? To understand how childhood video games shape us, we must first understand one fundamental truth. Playing is not trivial. It is how children learn. For decades, developmental psychologists like Jean Piaget and Lev Vygotsky have emphasized the role of play in cognitive and emotional development. It's through play that children experiment with rules, test boundaries, build confidence, and simulate real-world interactions in a low-risk environment. Video games, often misunderstood as mindless entertainment, are a modern, interactive extension of this natural learning process. Most video games are structured around one core idea: solving a problem. Whether it's lining up blocks in Tetris, escaping a test chamber in Portal, or building a thriving city in SimCity, games teach children to identify goals, make decisions, and refine strategies through trial and error. This form of learning is called experiential feedback-based learning. In other words, kids are constantly learning from their actions. And crucially, failure in video games isn't final. It's expected. Unlike school or sports where failure can be stigmatizing, games normalize failure as a part of growth. This encourages resilience, grit, and iterative thinking, qualities deeply linked to future academic and career success. Games also leverage goal-oriented motivation, a concept closely related to something called intrinsic motivation theory. Psychologists Deci and Ryan propose that humans are intrinsically motivated by three things: autonomy, the need to feel in control; competence, the need to feel effective; and relatedness, the need to feel connected to others. Games hit all three. Players choose how to play, autonomy, see themselves improve, competence, and often connect socially through multiplayer or story-based connections, relatedness. This makes gaming uniquely motivating, not because of the rewards themselves, but because of how those rewards are earned. Different genres engage different parts of the brain and encourage distinct cognitive habits. Platformers like Super Mario Bros. Improve hand-eye coordination, spatial reasoning, and timing. Puzzle games improve pattern recognition, logic, and lateral thinking. Strategy games foster long-term planning, multitasking, and risk assessment. Creative sandbox games like Minecraft stimulate the imagination, systems thinking, and architectural awareness. Repeated exposure to these gameplay structures can reinforce certain thinking styles, even after a child puts the controller down. Games also provide a safe space to experience and regulate complex emotions: frustration from a tough level, joy after a hard-earned victory, or sadness over a lost in-game companion. These emotional beats give children a low-stakes arena to learn how to manage their feelings. And, in character-driven games, children experiment with identity and values. Do you help the villagers? Do you choose revenge or forgiveness? These are not trivial questions, they're moral rehearsals. And for children, they help build a framework of ethics, empathy, and perspective-taking. Scientific studies back this up. A 2013 study found that action games improve decision-making speed without sacrificing accuracy. Educational games have been linked to improving outcomes in math, reading, and problem-solving, especially when tailored to an individual learning style. Brain imaging research shows that gaming can activate the prefrontal cortex, hippocampus, and dopaminergic systems, all areas involved in planning, memory, and reward. In short, the brain doesn't know you're just playing a game. It's learning deeply and efficiently. So, when I talk about how video games influence who we become, I'm not just talking about hobbies or nostalgia. I'm talking about how structured, interactive play during critical years of brain development can shape how we think, how we feel, and how we solve problems for the rest of our lives. And that's just the beginning. Why do some people become obsessed with min-maxing their resources, while others spend hours customizing a character's backstory? The answer doesn't lie in the games they play, but in who they are. And here's the twist: the kinds of games we gravitate towards don't just reflect our personality. Over time, they can shape them. Game preference is bidirectional, meaning your personality can influence what games you like, and those games can, in turn, reinforce or expand certain personality traits. Let's break down how these different game genres align and impact them. Role-playing games are more than just fantasy power trips. They place players in someone else's shoes, literally. Players who enjoy RPGs tend to score high in openness and empathy. They often enjoy deep storytelling, complex characters, moral dilemmas, and world exploration. Games like Undertale or Mass Effect don't just reward power, they reward ethical choices and emotional intelligence. Over time, this exposure can enhance a player's ability to take on others' perspectives and consider the consequences of their actions. And let's not forget, many writers, filmmakers, and therapists got their start crafting character arcs in fictional worlds long before real ones. Strategy games are a haven for systems thinkers, people who enjoy abstract reasoning, long-term planning, and managing multiple variables. These games tend to attract those who are very concise and have good cognitive complexity. The games reward patience, tactical foresight, pattern recognition, and risk management. Over time, players of strategy games may develop better executive function, the mental skills needed for planning, attention, and decision-making. It's no wonder that players of Civilization and Crusader Kings are commonly found in business, law, and economics, or just in leadership roles in general. They're the kind of people who know what they're doing. Sandbox and simulation games offer open-ended freedom. There's rarely one right way to play, and that's the point. These games appeal to players who are open-minded and seek autonomy. They promote creativity, strategic planning, social role-playing, architectural or systemic imagination. Children who spend hours building towns in Minecraft or experimenting with interpersonal dynamics in The Sims may develop early interest in psychology, design, sociology, or engineering. And games like Minecraft, often dismissed as simple, and are used in classrooms to teach architecture, coding, spatial reasoning, and providing the creativity and discipline that can exist beautifully while learning. Shooters and action games often get a bad rap, but the psychological profile is more nuanced than many assume. These games typically draw competitive players, sensation seekers. Key traits they reinforce is rapid decision-making, spatial awareness, team coordination, and tactical aggression. In multiplayer settings, players learn to lead, support, and strategize with others in real time. This can lead to improved social responsiveness and stress regulation, especially in high-pressure environments. However, the context matters. Several games do not have very friendly player bases, and instead of promoting the things I just talked about, in fact do the opposite, making it harder for new players to find a foothold. Puzzle games are cognitive gyms. They attract players high in intellect, problem-solving, curiosity, and often in introversion. They develop pattern recognition, logical reasoning, abstract thinking, and delayed gratification. While quieter in tone and pace, puzzle games train a deep form of concentration, a skill increasingly rare in an age of endless digital distraction. They're also a favorite among STEM-minded individuals, and can boost skills useful in mathematics, programming, and engineering fields. Of course, most modern games don't sit in one box. They blend genres, and in doing so, appeal to multifaceted personalities. A game like Stardew Valley offers many: farming for simulation, combat for action, social interaction for a narrative, and customization for a sandbox. Players who are drawn to hybrid games often display more psychological flexibility. They're open to multiple playstyles, shifting goals, and a mix of structure and freedom. These players are often generalists, people who thrive when they can switch gears and explore different aspects of life, rather than mastering a single narrow focus. The games we choose as kids don't just entertain us, they reveal us, and sometimes they shape us. Whether it's a strategic planner in Age of Empires, the storyteller in Dragon Age, the creator in Minecraft, or the improviser in Fortnite, each genre speaks to different sides of who we are, and as we play over hundreds of hours, thousands of choices, the genre starts to speak back. Not just how we play, but who we might become. For many players, the magic of childhood gaming wasn't just about pixelated graphics or leveling up. It was about logging on, connecting with others across the world in real time, from trade chats in RuneScape to sleep-deprived raids in World of Warcraft. The online gaming industry has quietly become one of the most influential social laboratories of the 21st century. In the early 2000s, the rise of online games transformed gaming into a social experience. Platforms like Neopets or Club Penguin function like digital playgrounds, spaces where kids learn to negotiate, collaborate, build communities, handle rejection and conflict. These environments simulated complex social dynamics well before social media ever entered their lives. And unlike real-world classrooms, online worlds allowed players to experiment with social identities in ways that felt safer and more playful. For a shy kid, playing as a confident wizard or a witty warrior wasn't just a role, it was practice. Team-based games taught an entirely different skill set: how to work with others under pressure. In games like that, Success depends not on individual skill, but team composition, communication, and adaptability. Players learn to work together, without a specific person to call the shots, how to resolve conflict after a heated argument, and that sometimes you need to let other people shine. These experiences are incredibly formative, especially for younger players who may not have yet had these dynamics in school or real life. Over time, the best teams don't just win, they learn how to trust each other. Online gaming develops communication skills, sometimes more than traditional social settings. Typing fast to warn a teammate, explaining a strategy over voice chat, negotiating loot in a dungeon. All of this sharpens verbal clarity, persuasion tone management, active listening, and, interestingly, many introverted or socially anxious players find voice chatting games less intimidating than face-to-face interactions. It's a form of asynchronous social exposure therapy, building confidence one match at a time. For many, online games are more than just social arenas. They're places to explore identity in a way that the real world doesn't always allow. MMORPGs, for instance, let players customize avatars, choose pronouns, and interact without the baggage of real-life stereotypes. For LGBTQ+ youth especially, online games have served as safe zones for self-expression, platforms to find chosen families, and spaces to rehearse coming out or trying new identities. In many ways, the freedom of online role-playing fosters self-acceptance long before players find it in the real world. Gaming friendships often defy geography, age, and even language. Players from different time zones meet through chance encounters in matchmaking lobbies, guild invites, or in-game trading, and those bonds stick. Some people maintain years-long friendships and teammates that they've never met in person. These are the pen pals of the digital age, built not on letters but shared quests, late-night voice calls, and mutual growth. As the gaming ecosystem grew more diverse and sophisticated, so did the communities. Discord servers, Twitch chats, and online forums became hubs for shared interests, mentorship, and even activism. Of course, the social side of video games isn't always wholesome. Many players, especially women and minorities, have faced toxicity, harassment, and exclusion in online spaces. The anonymity of the internet often brings out the worst in people, which is why digital citizenship has become so important, and why some developers and players alike are learning how to build healthier communities. Features like reputation-based matchmaking, meet report systems, moderator roles, community guidelines, are all part of teaching the next generation that freedom online comes with responsibility. And for kids growing up in these environments, learning to navigate conflict, advocate for fairness, and protect others is a real and lasting social education. The social skills practiced in online games don't stay in-game. Child gamers turned adults often bring with them fast communication skills, confidence in group dynamics, comfort with multicultural teams. The skills you use to quell a heated debate in the game are the same ones you use to solve office drama. When we think of a child playing games, we often picture a kid alone with a screen, but often they weren't alone. They were connecting, competing, and growing with others. Online gaming didn't just teach kids how to win, it taught them how to communicate, lead, collaborate, and that sometimes even taught them to be themselves. And in today's hyper-connected world, that kind of social training is not just valuable, it's essential. What do a software engineer, a level designer, a therapist, and a YouTuber all have in common? Many of them grew up playing video games. As it turns out, the games we play as children don't just shape how we think or socialize, they often nudge us towards what we do later in life. Let's explore how. Childhood games often act as a first exposure to real-world systems, wrapped in fun and fiction. For example, Kerbal Space Program introduces kids to aerospace physics. The Sims teaches basic psychology and urban planning. Minecraft fosters architecture, engineering, and environmental design. Civilization gives a crash course in history, economics, and diplomacy. These early experiences plant seeds. A child fascinated with designing a Minecraft redstone contraption might one day study electrical engineering. Someone who spent hours managing cities in SimCity could be inspired to pursue urban planning or public policy. Even the most seemingly just for fun games often contain the DNA of a future job. Beyond inspiration, games develop practical, transferable skills that map directly onto modern careers. For example, systems thinking from simulation games is great for engineers, economists, and analysts. Narrative design in RPGs is a natural segue into screenwriting, creative writing, and storytelling careers. Some developers even credit their early modding experiences in games like Half-Life or Skyrim as their first steps towards careers in game design. Games aren't just a pastime, they're a sandbox for skill building. For many gamers, the dream was simple. What if I could make games for a living? Today, the gaming industry has a £200 billion ecosystem that employs artists, engineers, writers, musicians, producers, testers, marketers, and even psychologists. Growing up immersed in games often drives players to learn the behind-the-scenes magic. Studying programming languages, animation software, sound design, game engines like Unity or Unreal. The industry has become more accessible than ever thanks to tools like Roblox Studio, RPG Maker, and Godot. Kids can now start publishing and building their own games before they even hit high school. Not every game-loving kid wants to make games. Some want to share them. In the last decade, entirely new careers have emerged around playing games, streaming, YouTube commentary, esports, virtual production, and social media-based game journalism. A kid who used to narrate Let's Play videos into their headset might now run a multi-platform brand. Some of today's top creators got their start on a bedroom webcams, just doing what they enjoy. Sometimes games shape career paths in ways that aren't obvious. Therapists use games like Animal Crossing or Minecraft in trauma-related care. Teachers gamify their lessons to better engage students. Medical professionals train in VR environments based on video game technology. The military and law enforcement use game-like simulations for decision-making drills. Even professions that seem distant from gaming can benefit from skills rooted in interactive media, pattern recognition, adaptability, and visual spatial reasoning. The lines are blurring, and games are increasingly being seen as not just distractions. There's something poetic about watching a childhood passion evolve into a lifelong vocation. Maybe it's the kid who used to build theme parks and Roller Coaster Tycoon becoming a real-world engineer, or the teen who spent nights theorizing about their favorite game ending up becoming a novelist. The games we played as kids weren't always about high scores or boss fights. Sometimes they were quiet blueprints for the lives we'd eventually build. Through imaginary worlds, we learned how to analyze, lead, design, tell stories, solve problems, and dream bigger. For some, those childhood gaming hours weren't time lost. They were careers in the making. Games often get boiled down to graphics and gameplay, but what they leave behind runs much deeper. Long after the console is powered off, the mental and emotional patterns developed through gaming continue to shape how we think, feel, and even respond to life. So, what are the long-term cognitive and emotional effects of growing up with video games? Let's explore. Let's start with the brain. Research shows that regular gameplay, especially during childhood, can sharpen several cognitive functions. Spatial awareness, problem solving, working memory, decision making under pressure, multitasking and attention shifting. Especially in real-time strategy or simulation games, players constantly juggle priorities. While not a one-size-fits-all solution, gaming, when balanced, can act like an exercise for the brain. Just like sports build physical coordination, certain games build mental agility. What about emotions? Games teach something many people struggle to develop even in adulthood. Emotional regulation. Failing a level multiple times and trying again, that's grit. Losing a competitive match and staying calm, that's sportsmanship. Managing disappointment after losing a prized item or character, that's coping. Choosing a peaceful solution in a moral dilemma, that's empathy and self-control. For kids, games provide a safe sandbox to process frustration, disappointment, and even moral conflict without real-world consequences. They learn how to try again, how to ask for help, how to improve. Over time, this builds resilience, the ability to bounce back, emotionally and mentally. Many games train players to recognize patterns, optimize systems, and anticipate outcomes. This builds what psychologists call systems thinking, the ability to see how parts interact within a whole. In Civilization, you're balancing diplomacy, economics, and culture. In Dark Souls, you're studying attack patterns, stamina timing, and level layouts. In Pokemon, you're building synergistic teams around type advantages. Over time, this kind of thinking bleeds into daily life, whether it's budgeting money, managing time, or recognizing interpersonal dynamics. Not all effects are positive. Gaming becomes harmful when it shifts from engagement to escape. When used to avoid problems rather than process them, excessive or compulsive gaming, especially without balance, can disrupt sleep and schoolwork, reduce physical activity, isolate players socially, and contribute to anxiety or emotional avoidance. It can replace real-world coping mechanisms with digital distractions. The key is intentionality. Games should be a tool, not a trap. Healthy gaming supports growth, unhealthy gaming can stall it. Some of the most powerful emotional developments in games come from empathy. Games with moral choice systems like Mass Effect, Undertale, and The Walking Dead force players to step into someone else's shoes to understand motives, consequences, and ethical ambiguity. They don't always offer a clear right answer. They ask, what kind of person do you want to be? Repeated exposure to these dilemmas, especially in formative years, can deepen emotional maturity, encouraging players to think beyond themselves. In a world increasingly driven by algorithms and headlines, this ability to pause, reflect, and feel is more important than ever. Gaming isn't just a pastime, it's a playground for the mind and the heart. Through puzzles and boss fights, dialogue and design, wins and losses, players develop ways of thinking and feeling that last a lifetime. Cognitive sharpness, emotional balance, resilience, empathy. Not every game teaches all of this. But for many of us, the games we played as kids don't just entertain us. They prepared us to think more clearly, feel more deeply, and live fully. Even if you've beaten the last boss, lost the save file, or not even have a controller to play, the impact of games we played as kids doesn't go away. It lingers in the way we think, in the things we value, and the people we've become. This is the legacy of play. For many of us, childhood games are core memories. The joy of unwrapping a new console, the thrill of finally beating that one impossible level, the hours spent exploring a pixelated world that felt limitless. Years later, even a few notes of a game's soundtrack can transport us back, not just to the game itself, but to who we were when we played it. In a way, these games become emotional time capsules, preserving a version of ourselves we might have forgotten. Games don't just shape how we remember the past, they become part of our cultural identity. Whether it's quoting a line from Ocarina of Time, humming the theme of Pokemon, or debating Final Fantasy storylines with friends, these experiences become a shared language, shorthand for connection. For many, these childhood games weren't just entertainment, they were safe spaces, lifelines, and communities in a time when they felt misunderstood or alone. They helped define who we are, and who we still are. Sometimes those early experiences of wonder and immersion come back, not just as nostalgia, but as creative drive. You see it in the artists who paint their favorite characters, the musicians who remix 8-bit tunes, the indie devs who recreate the magic of the games they grew up with, even writers who reimagine the stories that shape their sense of self. In each case, the game lives on, not just in memory, but in creation. More than we realize, games often leave fingerprints on our values. A game that taught to protect the weak, a story that made us rethink forgiveness, a character who mirrored our struggles, and still rose above them. As children, we may not have known what we were learning, but the lessons stuck. Games gave us a framework for empathy, courage, and curiosity, even how we define good and evil. In this way, the stories we told define how we live. Eventually, some gamers grow up, start families, find themselves sitting next to their kids, watching them pick up a controller for the first time, and suddenly, the cycle begins again. They pass down their favorite titles like old storybooks. They see their eyes light up at the same moments that theirs once did. The legacy of play becomes intergenerational, evolving but never disappearing. To others, it may have looked like we were just wasting time, just clicking buttons, just playing games. But it was more than that. We were exploring our minds, building identities, practicing courage, navigating emotion, connecting, coping, dreaming. It was never just a game. It was the foundation of how we process the world, and how we carry wonder into adulthood. So, when we talk about childhood video games, we're not just talking about pixels and power-ups. We're talking about memory, meaning, and the invisible scaffolding of who we are today. Because sometimes, the things that shape us most start with nothing more than pressing start.